This is ACC Nation with Will Ogeman and Jim Quist, featuring ACC sports news and interviews. Available on streaming radio, podcast, and YouTube. The college softball season begins early February. The D1Softball preseason top 25 is out, and our special guest is Tara Henry, the managing editor of D1Softball. Thank you so much for joining us.
Jim, Will, thanks so much for having me.
Hey, before we get into the top five, the top players, and the teams to watch in the ACC, you've received some very interesting news in late 2022. Tell us a little bit about what you're getting ready to do, because this is pretty exciting. I was reading about this, and I want you to share that with our audience.
Are you talking about me personally?
Yes, you personally, yes.
Yes. Well, just accepted the head coaching gig for Great Britain softball, and anybody that knows me knows how passionate I am about the international game and making sure that we grow it to be the sport that we all know and love. And so, yeah, really excited. Actually had a talk with the team today, our extended roster. We had a Zoom call. We're all over the country, world at the moment, but just excited to get going and have an incredible staff lined up, and Lincoln Martin, Jen Schroeder, and Linda Dirk, and excited to get going and head into the World Cup this summer in Dublin. So we're in the Dublin pool against Team USA, Australia, and Ireland, the host nation, and then we'll find out who the Asia qualifier is and the Africa qualifier is here shortly. But yeah, very exciting news, and just another important thing happening into the summer. I wasn't expecting that question.
He does that to people.
I am going to follow that up, because you need context here. Okay, so I know that you got your master's at Brighton. So I see a little bit of a tie there. I also see that you've done some coaching other places. And of course, that glorious 2004 UCLA national championship team in which you were on. So we've got all this, and we all bring it together. Tell us a little bit about this journey that is taking you to be the head coach.
It's interesting that you kind of mentioned that big, long gap in between. And I think there's obviously that's been a lot that has happened in between being at UCLA and playing for the Bruins, and then now becoming the head coach at Great Britain. But going back to school at the University of Brighton in England really, I think, sparked my love for the game again. I think sometimes here in the States, it's a lot. I think travel ball, the club circuit, it's a lot. The Division I circuit is a lot. And to be honest, quite frankly, I was burnt out for a little bit, and heading back and getting a degree in sport for international development and peace, and seeing firsthand how sport can be used for good, be used for social change, and the impact softball was able to have not only on the women and girls in Great Britain, but I did some work in Croatia and Italy and Malta, Czech Republic, and then ended up in the Gambia in Western Africa. And so development is something that I truly believe in, and just excited to help kind of spread that international world, and love that we're talking about it on ACC Nation.
This is it's a fantastic story. That's why I'm asking about it. I'm reading, and I'm going like, this is where we're starting right here, because this is really what it's all about. This is a cool thing, and I do want to point out one thing here before we get into a little more of the meat of why we ask you on. You said sport, and in the United States, everybody's so used to saying sports. And it is sport in Europe for the most part. So that I just wanted to throw that out, because every time I hear somebody, when I saw that master's, I was like, sport. Yes. So very specific European, as opposed to America, where we put the S on everything. So it's like, I don't know.
It's okay. We can agree to disagree. It happens a lot. Sometimes I say weird words or put extra L's or have a Z replace an S, and then they have to remind me that I'm back in the States. But yes, absolutely. Sport for international development and peace.
Yeah, it's all good. I just thought that was an interesting thing because I know somebody will catch that and go, "Sport? What are you talking about?" That's the whole thing. Hey, let's talk a little bit about the top five in the D1 softball preseason top 25, and we'll start off with number five, and then we'll work our way forward and give us some idea of why these teams were selected in the order that they were selected and why you think. And when we get to number one, this is a story. This is really a huge story. So we'll start with number five, Florida. Talk to us about why the Gators are where they are this season at number five in the preseason poll.
You take a look at a Florida and you'd argue last season that, they weren't quite where they needed to be, and then come through the Blacksburg Regional and advance to the Women's College World Series. And Tim Walton he finds a way to get it done. And when you've got a coach like that at the helm, it's really hard to count the Gators out. You've got a Skylar Wallace, a Kendra Falby, Elizabeth Hightower, Alexi Delbray, who got tons of experience at the Women's College World Series last year. And I think Florida at that five spot is a good place for them to start. It is a preseason poll, but in looking at what they've got and the new talent that's coming in, again, any squad that's led by Tim Walton, you put up there in the top five because they know how to win, and they have done so. And so we're looking at the Florida Gators in that number five spot.
With good reason. I'm going to let Will take the rest of this cluster of five here, and then we'll step through them.
Okay, so let's go to number four, and that is the Florida State Seminoles, a team coming off a 53-win season. One of their, you're getting one of the top pitchers for sure in the ACC and maybe in all of softball, and Catherine Sandercock, someone who won 30 games for the Noles last season. And yeah, Florida State's had a pretty good history of putting out some really strong pitchers, and obviously with her, that trend is continuing.
Absolutely. You have a Catherine Sandercock in the circle, and I think it's hard to argue against them. And again, would say that is the top team in the ACC. Again, another team led by Lonnie Alameda, an incredible coaching mind and somebody that really focuses on culture and really has a pitching staff that she does a nice job with, pitch by committee. But I think what's really interesting about the Noles is, as we all know, it was a really early exit last year, and they lost to a really hot Mississippi State team. And I'd argue that squad has come back with a little bit of a vengeance and something to prove. But you got Michaela Edenfield, a Josie Muffley, a Devin Flaherty. But I'm looking at Avery Westbrook, the young freshman, and her taking over for Sydney Sherrill at third base. And, there's a long line of third basemen there with Hamilton and Warren and Sherrill. And to see Westbrook step into that hot corner is something I'm going to keep an eye on heading into season. But an easy thing, I think we get some flack putting Florida State up so high, but it was an incredible squad. And again, when you have coaching like that, a team that can pitch and put together a series of hits and add some power, there's no question in my mind that they're the preseason number 14.
Definitely a lot of veteran experience back for the Noles this year. Let's move on to number three, Oklahoma State. Another really, really strong season there. And, obviously they finished number three and they're right back up there again this year. What do you like about them this year?
Again, you've got, I think that one of the best pitchers in the country in Kelly Maxwell. The Cowgirls fell short against Texas, and I think that was another heartbreaker. There was some defensive blunders there at the Women's College World Series, and Kenny Gajewski does just an incredible job mixing in transfers. And then you got Lexi Kilfoyle to help bolster that pitching staff, two-way player from Alabama. Now, keep an eye on her and see if she can stay healthy. I think if she stays healthy, again, she's replacing a Miranda Ellish that has since graduated. But if she can stay healthy, I think the Cowgirls, again, with a Kelly Maxwell, you've got a left-hander and a right-hander. I think they're going to be a tough team to beat. And then Rachel Becker, transferred from Purdue. Keep an eye on Rachel Becker. She joins the Cowgirls this season. So again, another coach in Kenny Gasky that seems to be able to bring his squad together and win when they need it the most. So wouldn't be surprised to see them back in OKC in June.
Number 2 is UCLA, and probably the best program out west. They've been just continually one of the best programs in the Pac-12 for a number of years now. And once again, they just have a lot of pieces that are going to keep them right in contention for national championship this year.
And, I try not to be biased. Obviously, I am an alum there. And I think I'm actually harder on the Bruins than I am, if anything. I really am. But when you have an arm like Megan Faramo, it's tough. It's tough for opposing offenses. And then you add Brooke Yanez from Oregon. And you've got transfers in Janelle Mionyo, who was the Pac-12 batting champion at one point. You've got Charlize Palacios behind the dish from Arizona, Rachel Sid from Oregon. And then we haven't even talked about Maya Brady, who I believe is just one of those players that you can't even count out. And Aaliyah Jordan comes back for her 7th year with the Bruins. 7th year, Aaliyah Jordan. So again, another just bulked up squad and a Bruin team that I think is also hungry as well. And those new pieces, those newcomers, and also a freshman in Megan Grant. Keep an eye on Megan Grant. I think the Bruins are going to be a real tough contender in the pack. I can't see anybody that's going to challenge them at this point.
And to the surprise of anyone who follow college softball, number 1 is Oklahoma. They've been far and away the most dominant program in college softball for a number of years. Came off a season where they lost just 3 times all season, 59-3, ladies and gentlemen. That is a pretty impressive and just shows just the kind of machine they have rolling there.
I think machine is a proper description of the Oklahoma Sooners. And you think, they're losing a Jocelyn Allo. They're losing a Hope Trotwine to graduation. And then you take a look at them bringing in an Alex Sirocco from Michigan. You've got Haley Lee from Texas A&M coming in. Sydney Sanders, the freshman, the Pac-12 freshman of the year, joining the Sooners. And that's just the newcomers. You've also got Kinsey Hansen, obviously Jada Coleman in center field, and Bryce Lyons, Alyssa Brito. I mean, the list goes on. I would argue that they're I don't know, their bench is maybe the number 2-3 team in the country as well. It's a really deep bench, and you've got to hand it to Patty Gasso and JT Gasso and Jen Roca, because they prepare those teams year in and year out. And I also don't think JT Gasso gets enough credit. He's an incredible offensive mind, and for him to lead that offense and give those hitters exactly what they need to succeed is the biggest reason they are number 1. And I think we're looking at a three-peat, which UCLA is the only other school that has done that in the history of our sport. So I think Oklahoma has a good shot at getting that three-peat.
So before I give it to Jim, I just want to ask one quick question about Patty Gasso. Where did just kind of looking at the trajectory, she's obviously done this for a long time. Where is she kind of in the pantheon of great coaches in softball history?
I would argue she's up there as one of the greatest, if not the greatest. I mean, her legacy is incredible in what she's done at Oklahoma and the All-Americans and obviously the national titles. I think she's a new age. Like, we look back and my old coach, Sue Inquist, and Sharon Backus at UCLA, but then you've got Carol Hutchins and Mike Candrea, and, Lou Shares Hamper at Georgia. I don't think Lou gets enough credit either. But Patty, it's hard to argue when all is said and done, and not only what she's done on the field, but in terms of pay and having a strong female coach as a role model, and showing the rest of the country and the world that softball coaches are worth it, and for her to stand there and be in that spot and allowing women like myself and people across the world to have that opportunity, I think that's even more of a legacy than the national championships.
Yeah, that's You just hit that on the head. I have a quick question before I get a little further into Oklahoma. I need you to dispel a rumor for me. And that is that UCLA players don't bleed blood; they bleed infield dirt. And I don't know where the. Never mind. Well, let's just get into.
They probably bleed blue and gold. That I've heard that. I don't know about infield dirt, but blue and gold. You could say that they bleed blue and gold. I'll give you that.
We'll take that one, and we'll say that's the truth rather than
Yeah.
the rumor. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about Oklahoma. Because what I want you to do, I want you to step back for a second because of the coaching experiences you have. We'll start out with the playing experience because not every player can become a coach. And it's a difficult thing to do. And obviously you've made that transition. You have that vision. And that's an important thing. It allows you to step back and sometimes see the bigger picture. So what I want you to do for a second here is to use that ability, that experience. And I want you to look at Oklahoma for a second and tell us what you think is one or more of the important keys of what makes that program so successful.
Well, I think it's probably well, I know it is. Every day at practice, they compete with one another. So at any given point, your starting job, your starting role is not set in stone. And I think when you're in a practice environment to where, they use the phrase there, and iron sharpens iron. I think when you're in that type of environment, when you are constantly competing and knowing that the idea is to get better, I think that's what allows Oklahoma and that program to be great. They've got a very strong team culture, and it's built around a championship mindset, and showing up to practice every day, competing is something that they do really well. And you can see that in the way that they play and the way that they perform in high pressure situations. They are put in those high pressure situations every day at practice. And I can't believe I'm forgetting a Jordy Ball and Nicole May. When you're facing Jordy Ball, Nicole May, Alex Storako at practice almost every day, you're facing three incredibly great arms, if not the great, best in the country. So as a hitter, you're constantly challenged, vice versa. Those three are facing the best hitters in the country. So I think an environment that is really based in competition and healthy competition, and your spot is never solidified. And I think that keeps all those players hungry every day to get better, and put the team in front of the self. And I think that is a big reason Oklahoma is so successful, is because it is about the team, not about the individual at the end of the day.
I like to hear the analysis of coaches. It should give anyone who's observing or listening a better concept of how teams succeed. And so I always like to ask questions like that to get that feel. Let's get into the broader picture of things in college softball altogether. Players that we should be watching this season, and that top 25 especially. Now I know there's you've D1 softball, you've got your top freshmen and things like that lists, but let's talk about people who are really key, people that you can immediately think off the top of your head, this person's going to really be making a big difference, either by pitching, fielding, batting, whatever it may be. Any one of those areas.
We've got a great list up on the website. So we've got our preseason D100 player rankings up on the website. TRE Jennings is our number one player, again, obviously out of Oklahoma. Addison Barnard, Wichita State, another incredible offensive threat. Bailey Klinger out of Washington, and we talked about Megan Farema. We talked about Catherine Sandercock, Kiki Malloy out of Tennessee, Hannah Gamble out of Arkansas. I mean, the list goes on and on, but again, we've got our D100 list and we rank players. And the cool thing about what we get to do is, we've got rankings that go up every 2 weeks on the site. So we've got power rankings for every position. We've got power rankings, obviously, for pitchers, catchers, outfield, and then each of the position players. But, I'm really interested to see how Danielle Williams does at Northwestern. Northwestern returns almost the entire squad, other than Rachel Lewis. I mean, I know she was the Big Ten Player of the Year and a huge, hole to fill, but Northwestern returned back to the Women's College World Series for the first time since the early 2000s. And what the Drohan sisters have done there and to bring them back to Oklahoma City, that's a team I've got my eye on. Clemson, I had a great interview with Coach Rittman just last week, and he's excited about his squad. And, they've got some transfers coming in that I think are going to make a pretty big impact. And Caroline Jacobson and Allie Meeklish, who comes over from Wisconsin. Wisconsin, another team to keep an eye on. Kayla Conwent is back. She was a former Big Ten Player of the Year. She's back for another year. And again, another team that returns most of the lineup. And in that Big Ten, also Nebraska. Keep an eye on Nebraska and what Rhonda Revelle is doing there. So I know we talked about players, but we're getting into teams now. But I think you can kind of take a look at that list. So we've got it up on D1Softball.com. But those are kind of some of the few to keep an eye on, and excited to see what happens heading into season, because that thing changes. Believe it or not, it does change and goes up and down as we get into season.
All right, so let me emphasize something here very quickly. D1Softball.com. If you're not following, if you're not subscribed, you need to do that now. If you're a fan of softball, if you're not a fan of softball, you will become one if you go to a game, if you start following and watching, because it is an exciting sport. It's dynamic, and the energy on and off the field is staggering sometimes for me. I love watching. So D1Softball.com is where you want to go. Follow them on Twitter, and you can also subscribe to the site. So make sure that you do that. We'll get into the rest of the ACC top 25 for us, and let's talk about all these teams that are left here.
Okay, you touched on Clemson a moment ago, and I just want to kind of point out just how impressive them being so high up in the rankings is, considering they started the 2020 season was supposed to be their first season, but it was obviously wiped out with COVID. But they went ahead and in their first full season and won the ACC, and I think that's just a real credit to their coaching right there.
We're seeing a real rise in the ACC. And Clemson is a big part of that. We'll talk about Duke in a little bit, but John Rittman, 18 years at Stanford. I played against John Rittman when he was the head coach at Stanford, and then 10 years with the U.S. national team. Again, when you've got a coach like that, a skipper like that, and somebody that has that knowledge, for the Tigers to do what you just said, to win the ACC in that amount of time, is remarkable, and a huge reason that they're at number 9 in our preseason poll. And then you've got a player like Valerie Cagle and a Millie Thompson and a Mackenzie Clark. It's a group that's been together for some years now. So I would say it's no longer kind of feeling each other out and getting, processes down. It's now, how do we move forward as a team and get to that next step? And I know them reaching the supers last year was huge for Clemson. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if they make a run at that Women's College World Series. It's going to rely on that pitching staff, but they've got all the tools to potentially make it to Oklahoma City. And Rittman's done it before, so it's not like he hasn't done it before, just not at Clemson.
Number 13 is Virginia Tech, a team that whose program has really risen over the last handful of years. They get a Bree Peck back, who had a monster freshman season, and I mean they do have to replace one of their top pitchers, but I feel like that their top pitcher is already in house.
Yes, so obviously replacing Akili Richard is a difficult task, but you got Emma Lemley coming right in on her heels, and I was able to watch Virginia Tech about 2 seasons ago. They came out to Supers here in Los Angeles. Was able to watch Keely Richard in action and spoke with Coach Diamore as well. And I think looking at that lineup again, you got Lemley, you got Ritter, Fagan, Peck, Overitis, Slaw. That Blacksburg regional, winning that first game against Florida and then dropping the next two, that was tough to see. And again, I know that everybody's vocal on social channels about their pitcher Emma Lemley and if she's illegal and grow upping, but I think again we've got Virginia Tech probably finishing third in the ACC with Florida State and Clemson above them, but that's a veteran squad and they can hit. They can flat out hit and they're gutsy, and it's going to rely on that pitching staff. And if they can kind of hold it together in the circle, I think another big contender in the ACC.
Last team in the rankings is Duke at number 22, a team coming off a 44-11 season. Obviously, we're finished the season higher, but they do have to replace several of their key contributors last year. But still, a credit to their coach, Marissa Young, who's done a really good job since the program started in 2017.
Yes, I mean you lose Peyton St. George, obviously to graduation, and we talked a little bit about Caroline Jacobson, but Jayla Wright is the key here. And I was able to watch her in the Super Regional here out in Los Angeles, and she keeps the ball down. She's a heck of a competitor. She had 13 wins just a season ago and a 2.09 ERA. So it starts with Jayla Wright. But what I'm really excited about, and I think the biggest question mark for Duke is that freshman class. And Marissa Young, the head coach, she's pretty excited about this freshman class, saying it's one of the best she's had since being there at Duke. Again, another young program in Duke in the ACC, but another program that's already regularly in our top 25. So we talked about the ACC and the rise of the ACC, and we're seeing that in softball, a sport that was dominated largely by the Pac-12 for a really long time. And now you argue the SEC is the dominant force, but again, the ACC is on the rise and right up next to the SEC, the Big 12, and the Pac. So it's no longer the ACC over here, just in line with the major conferences, which before, to be honest, it wasn't. It was literally Florida State.
Yes, it was for a long time. And Tara, tell us about how people can follow along with what you're doing in Great Britain.
So obviously you can follow the Great Britain national team. We're on Twitter. We'll be having, you can head on over to britishsoftball.org. You can follow the Great Britain national team. I believe it's GB Softball. Myself, New Terrible Days on Twitter. And then we'll keep some updates going. And like I said, that project's been really fun, and that'll get going heading more into the summer. But Dublin is one of the locations for the World Cup of Softball. Let's just keep it on everybody's radar. We do have the World Cup of Softball this summer. Another location is in Spain and Italy. So there's 3 groups. Those 3 groups consist of 6 teams. So that's 18 teams competing for the World Cup. They'll take the top 2 from each pool. And then that will obviously be 6, and then they'll have 2 wild cards. So there'll be 8 teams that will play in 2024 for the World Cup final that will be held in Italy. So that's kind of a little bit of a breakdown of the World Cup of Softball, but really cool to have that international stage. And this is the first time that this format will be used with the WBSC, the World Baseball Softball Confederation, our global governing body of softball. This is the first time that format will be used.
And if you want to go and watch this in Dublin, I would encourage you to do that, because Dublin is a great place. That's a great scene for anything. If you like to go and have fun, and it's very inexpensive to go from like Boston over. It's not bad. And right now prices are great. So, lock it in and make sure you go over and
yeah, all are welcome. You two are more than welcome to join.
There you go.
Open invitation. to come and hang out and watch some softball, talk about some softball, and maybe go to the pub or two. There's a few there, I would argue.
Never get us out of
What?
the pub. That would be the problem right there. I know better. Oh my. Our special guest, Tara Henry, the managing editor of D1Softball. Thank you so much, Tara, and congratulations on this new position. And thank you so much for coming by and talking to us about the preseason top 25 softball poll.
Thanks so much, Jim and Will. Thank you so much for all that you do, and can't wait to see what happens during season and see how the ACC shakes out and who makes it to Oklahoma City.